All right, I think we are finally live. Everything's taking a moment to load up. Everything should be good, though. Should have good quality sound. Hey, everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Thought I would sit down, do a current events and a Q&A for you guys. I thought I would briefly cover just an interesting topic. This whole idea of, can T clinics replace the black market as far as people who use gear and enhanced lifters and athletes? I think the answer is actually yes. And the reason I've had to discuss that, because I've said, look, we need to have changes, in the U.S. And what happens if we actually did crack down on the war on drugs? What would happen with the economy, all this other stuff? And these are valid questions to ask. People have said, even in the gear world, well, what would happen with all of us? Well, honestly, in the U.S., if all of that stuff really happened, the economy would be thriving. It would absolutely massively improve the economy. I've discussed in a lot of detail why that is in the past. If the flow of drugs was completely stopped into the U.S. illegal drugs, all your crime, welfare, everything would go down. Total people working jobs, everything would go up astronomically. So the economy would be good, and the extra expense of the T clinics really wouldn't be a big deal. And then people say, but could you get everything that we needed? And the answer is, I think, yes. But the thing is, everything that you got would be FDA approved, high grade, everything would be clean, high quality, no contaminants, and yeah, you really wouldn't need anything beyond stuff like test, nandrolone, aromatase inhibitors, right? You really wouldn't, because you could regulate all that stuff, and the doctors can easily keep your E2 in the normal range. People who don't want a bunch of testosterone sides could simply use nandrolone. People who don't like nandrolone could do test and control it with aromatase through their doctor. Growth hormone would cover any of your peptide needs realistically. The only downside is the financial cost. Like, we need to be realistic. The only advantage really that happens out of black market is cost and availability. It's just more expensive to do all this stuff through a T clinic. But from a benefits perspective, you can get everything that you need as long as you're not trying to be a pro bodybuilder, right? And this is what I tell people, and pro bodybuilding is going to kill you anyways. People who care about their health, you don't need their sort of amounts to do anything that you want to do, even as someone who wants to be an enhanced lifter. You really don't. And I don't think people are understanding how potent, when you're training, quit training like garbage, actually train hard. I don't think people understand how potent prescription FDA grade from a medical doctor, like 200 milligrams of test plus 200 milligrams of DECA a week plus some growth hormone with all your E2, everything kept in the perfect range. No, I don't think people understand at all how potent that is, right? I don't think people understand at all how potent that is. And that's kind of the point that I make. But, your health would be a lot better off, right? Right, absolutely, Paul. Eating a little bit of junk food during the season is like grocery. It really is. And this is why you have to have a strategy for that. Is it pointless to take a low dose of exogenous GH without a test space if you have a naturally high range test? I don't know that it's pointless, but you're not going to get. I guess it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Honestly, Joe, depends on what you're trying to get out of it. I wouldn't say that it's pointless, but I mean, do you think that you're going to gain muscle? Obviously not. Let's be clear on that. You're not going to gain any muscle. Also, hit that like button, guys. Why are we not getting any likes in here? Get them likes up, y'all. Hit like. I have no likes so far with regulars in here. But I digress. Back over to that point. You're not going to gain muscle without any synergistic effect from androgens. Anti-aging, collagen, better sleep. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, you can get that. Just dudes think they're going to take growth hormone and gain like 5 pounds of muscle or something. That's absolutely not happening. Not without anabolics. Yeah. Hey, train, but some of that could be adjusted with changes in law. So I do see what you're saying. They're pushing secretagogues. That's been a more recent thing, though. For a while, it wasn't a problem. A couple of years ago, this was not a problem. But keep in mind, Chad, go back to the original context of The reason I discuss this is because I've actually talked about in a lot of my current events of cracking down, really waging a war on drugs and absolutely shutting that down, the entire flow of illegal stuff like cocaine, the flow of meth, heroin, everything into the country, and treating it like a military matter of why it would boost the economy. It would fix 50% of our problems in the US. Like half of our problems, economic, social crime, violence, abuse, welfare, would all go away in that case. But lifters have brought up the point, but what about people who want gear? Like this would affect lifting, it would affect sports. And I think the answer is in that environment, given the economic boost, given the quality of life boost, if we had to bite the bullet, we just pay the extra money for everything and simply go through the T clinics, right? No, EJ, I haven't done anything with RL in years. It's been like 3 years, maybe longer. Right, it's been like 3 years. And those collabs are not up anymore. They should have. I think they removed all of those. And I don't want to do too many black market topics here, guys, because again, I am multi-streaming. I wanted to just mainly discuss legal stuff. Ted, that question is too hard to answer because there's been a shift in the market this year. No, for about 6 years, 95% of the primo on the black market was real. There was a period where it was fake, then a long period where it was real. Now we're drifting into some problems again as a 2025. There's a lot of complexity involved with that. Hey, Jason, have you heard of Retrotide? It's Ozempic, this protein sparing. It's not necessarily better than Ozempic for it. And Ozempic only caused muscle loss in the context of the calorie deficit it created. But coach, by that same token, even you have separated gear from recreational drugs, which I agree. Right, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, we have to place them in different categories because people are taking anabolics for quality of life. They're taking them for career purposes. They're not taking them for the purpose of getting a buzz or a mind altered state. So it is very, very different. In many people, it improves quality of life enough that they actually become more productive as citizens. They become more productive in their careers and so on. Right. And I think people forget about that part, when they talk about testosterone. Right. Hey, EJ, I'm wanting to not talk about haters and trolls at all. I wanted them to be a dead topic in my live stream. So I want to stop giving them air if we could. Is that cool? All right. So Chad says, even many of my clients hate the hoops they have to jump through getting prescribed and monitored TRT through a clinic, right? And it is more out of pocket. But if we're talking about these other scenarios, at the end of the day, the economy would be better. Like we would all be making more money. So we could be begging the question of, is it worth it in that case? And I've noticed that with T clinics, it's not really that big a hoops. It really isn't. If you pick the right clinics. I think if you're going through your GP, that's the biggest problem. A lot of the clinics are very, very, very chill with it. But I think with some of your clients, it's because they're wanting very, very large doses. A lot of the more chill clinics, someone wanting, say, 200 test step and 200 DECA is not that hard to get through the clinic. Prescription, perfectly legal. Maybe not where you are, but in clinics that I've seen and known of. It's not overly difficult. But, this is where we would have to make the position of adjusting the medical industry, right, in such a way to where doctors would be freer to do these things and prescribe stuff more easily. Crack down on the hard drugs, and then things like this that are done for cosmetic purposes, quality of life, all these things that we'd be a little more loose with it. Say, look, if we're going to get rid of the illegal stuff, let's make sure the legal stuff is, if we're going to crack down on meth and crack harder and wipe out the flow of those, which I've done a lot of talks in these live streams about. We could also have discussions of that. And I think it's easier to get that sort of reform now because a lot of wealthy people or people with voting power and economic power want access to these things, right? A lot of women who are not even like serious lifters want growth hormone for the cosmetic benefits and get it prescribed. Like we're in an era where these sort of things are a different world today. And there's more mainstream acceptance among people with money and influence. If that makes sense. You're right with those chill clinics, I guess, here are scarce. Many clinics here want to prescribe endoclonopin, and yeah. I'm a poor one. Sounds like this is a problem with the clinics you have there. But I think what would end up happening realistically, if you saw a serious shutdown on the black market due to knocking down the flow of other drugs and it being a casualty in it, I think it would create more demand. This would create a larger business model for this, right? It would increase the buying power and the demand on the demand side from a business perspective. Therefore, there would be pressure with lawmakers. There would be pressure with doctors and businesses to provide a legal, clean product in this case. And again, being illegal because it's not being prescribed. Because if we really see a war on drugs, the way some people would like, and even you're seeing Trump do some of that. Keep in mind, Trump has been using the military to hit drug boats and stuff. He has ramped up certain stuff. It's just not getting a lot of airtime. Mostly just complaints from the Dems on the committees and stuff who are pissed about it, about him overreaching by doing that. So you're seeing stuff about that. But if more of that happens, you may see the black market get hit harder and harder. And then therefore guys who want stuff, they're going to have to go more to the T clinics, in which case more demand creates more business. Right? But yeah, it's definitely a topic of discussion. But I'm talking about this in the context of a larger picture. And I felt like addressing this topic because this is something that's come up there when I've discussed, because it's being a fitness channel of me bringing up those topics about, politically and socially a war on drugs. All right. Dr. Chu and Kelly have scared my clients with the test and the phantom side effects, right? Oh man. And realistically, you and I know fat people get side effects from testosterone. People who work out and are healthy body fats don't seem to have most of these problems, do they? Your experience as a coach and a lifter, you know this too. This is a fat person problem. Well, what about all these problems from it? Well, don't be fat. Don't be fat and sedentary, and all of a sudden it becomes kind of a non-existent thing. Would it be fair deal to ban any illicit anabolic drug permanently in the U.S. and just have doctor prescribed TRT? Well, they already are. You already have but doctor prescribed anabolics are given too. So nandrolone is also given in some T clinics, along with other things like growth hormone, peptides. These things are supplied, Alan. Is pretty routine at this point. It's just like there's a reason SARMs never got approved by the FDA. None of them compete with nandrolone. Like nandrolone is objectively better at being a SARM than all these SARMs are. So the FDA is not going to replace it by allowing SARMs to be approved. right? Efficacy and safety, it wins out. But we can talk about other stuff, guys. Like I did make this as the title, but I mean, this is the Q&A, current events. What else is going on in the world? Man, this is dead. Man, my live streams have just been dead lately. Can speed work be done outside of a conjugate system? Sure, but I don't ever program it outside of a conjugate system. Right? Because conjugate was built around the best way to program speed work. It's a big part of the system. So if people are not going to run conjugate and we're going to do more classic type training in general, I don't personally ever program speed work for my non-conjugate clients. Right? Because a lot of what you get from speed work is the way that it flows in the conjugate system. That is a big chunk of the benefits. You know, it's done between your downtime from the true max effort days. It's still getting the practice, getting the speed carryover, all those things. With there being no conclusive data that GH accelerates tumor growth, in your opinion, is avoiding GH in that case just a cautionary thing? Are you talking about for normal people or someone who has pre-existing tumors? I wouldn't chance it with tumors. Like if I had tumors of any type present, I would definitely not be using growth hormone in that case. I mean, I would, again, it's just, that would just be common sense. There's no conclusive data, but you could look at mechanisms of action. Right? No conclusive data, but you could extrapolate common sense. Right? Yeah, I mean, well, I'm hoping more stuff will get pushed out in general peppermint as I'm not spamming stuff anymore. So I'm kind of seeing what happens with a lot of it. Right? Seeing what happens with a lot of it. But they have to run a long enough time to get people in here. We got to have hard hitting stuff. And I do feel like we get in cases where, man, I'm not having hard enough hitting topics to rope people in early. And so I'm not sustaining that great energy that I need in the afternoon one. So it's partially my fault. You know, I should probably get some stronger topics. But I've been busy doing all of my coaching stuff and my Facebook stuff more. Yeah, a lot of the regulars haven't been as active. Yeah, well, they get bored because they've had a huge amount of live streams lately. Coach, thoughts on this, or has you programmed? Yeah, I'll let you retype that. Yeah, that didn't make any sense. I may have to go back over to doing more actual, some informative stuff again, and only one live stream. You know, might be the direction we need to go, because I probably have oversaturated it. So the coffee chats may need to completely go and just work on other projects in the morning. It would be completely doable. Because ultimately the coffee chats are just not always as lucrative. Yeah, might be what I have to do. Plus I'm more awake. You know, the coffee chats were nice when I was doing certain stuff, but they're at a point where we might be better just doing a single big live stream in the afternoons and just double stream at both platforms. And I think that would rope more people in and then drop them an informative video. All right, we're back to putting out informative content. Injectable Winstrol stronger than Primo. It's a common dose for Primo. Hey, Ted, because those are illegal drugs, you're not getting prescribed in the U.S., I'm not going to really discuss them while I'm double streaming. Stronger, we could argue that all day long. Way higher side effect, way higher side effect. Plus, that is, you're getting into hypotheticals. Hey, Chad, think about what Ted just asked. You're a serious lifter, long-term coach and serious lifter and bodybuilder. Hey, bro, if they were roughly equal, even remotely equal, would you want to use injectable Winstrol in place of Primo, even if it was slightly stronger? On a pragmatic side. Or would you be like, hell no? Yeah, think about quality of life. Right? Injectable Winstrol is not exactly fun. You're walking around with a softball on your butt cheek for 2 weeks. It hurts. Coach, thoughts on this, or have you programmed a power building split with a rotational LME work? We're coming power building plus conjugate without speed work. I would need to see exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, you could do the odd coffee chat once a week. With rotational, I've done power building stuff with rotational ME work. The downside with too much of that, it buries you pretty quickly if you're not really, really careful. Right? I've used stuff like that myself, and I programmed it for clients. The fatigue management side can get really problematic with true ME work worked in too frequently. Train with Chad, never a place for Winstrol outside of being in a deep bodybuilding contest prep, and even in that case, oral. I'm gonna agree with that. I would never recommend anyone use Winstrol who's not getting ready for a bodybuilding show. Even a photo shoot, it's simply not worth it. If you're just doing a photo shoot, some modeling, it's not worth it. Just in terms of the side effects, the hit to your health. And even then, yeah, dudes can just use the oral. I remember, let's go back old school. Remember when guys just started drinking their injectable Winstrol instead of injecting it? That became a thing because there was tons of pharmaceutical injectables still out there. So FD, like actual pharmaceutical stuff at amps, the dudes just started drinking the amps eventually. Kind of became normal back in the day when I was younger. Dudes were like, oh, just drink it. You're just better off. Just crack the amp open and drink it. It's just less problematic. 3-day push-pull legs, bench squat, deadlifting, rotation, we work 4 or 5 ME variations plus accessories 3 days a week. We don't get buried. Yeah, that's doable. With 3 days a week, that can be doable. We start talking a 4-day plus though with ME and like an upper lower rotation, you get buried quick. But what you're talking about, that's workable. Yeah. Yeah, a push-pull legs type rotation. But you're only training 3 days a week. No, I think that can be workable. That will handle a lot of the fatigue management, only lifting 3 days a week. Because I've done stuff with, like, you've seen me do 6-day ME in a rotation. I eventually got serious overtraining symptoms, all the way up to the cramps at night, inability to sleep due to the back cramps and hamstring cramps. But it got my deadlift up into the 600s for the first time on the channel. But yeah, I was sleeping 8 to 10 hours a night just trying to make that work. It was stupid. But you know, we like to push those limits sometimes, don't we? We like to push those limits. Yeah, it was no, it's pretty good. Very, very little local damage on the tornado. I lost power for 3 hours yesterday. So I did lose power yesterday for 3 hours. I'm good, like no damage on my street, but a couple houses got some damage and stuff in my neighborhood. But yeah, the tornado definitely came pretty close over us. But thank you, appreciate the concern. I appreciate the concern, brother. Yeah, I used to do rows. I was doing rows every day during that time. A lot of them that were axle bar rows and stuff, axle bar pendlay rows that reduced the weight. But man, the grip end of it was phenomenal. You know, the grip side of that. The majority of clients do not have the ideal lifestyle, so handle many of these programs. No matter what I preach, optimal lifestyle, yeah, they won't. Let's be fair, dude. Most of our drug-free clients, really need to be training 3 days a week. They really do. I find it's just more manageable, right? If you have guys with busy careers and kids, and your training is you really train them hard, 4+ days a week is very difficult on the fatigue management side, unless you're doing very short sessions. Like we can do it with conjugate with a lot of my guys, but we're down to very minimalist accessory work. You know, it's the lack of the ideal lifestyle. People who eat a little junk, they have a drink with the boys on Friday, a couple drink, you can't push people with optimal training. You can't do it in that environment. Any major issues to do the 3 day a week program, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, for those who only have that time on the weekends? Yeah, you could have issues of session to session. Your recovery is going to be garbage. It works, but you're also going to have issues of possible, muscle protein synthesis uptime with that long of a 4 days not training every week. I mean, there's issues, but what other choice do you have, right? So, Alan, it's their issues, but if they're issues you cannot control, you cannot work around. There's literally nothing you can do about it, and you just simply accept it. You know, and you just really don't have any choice in the matter. So yeah, there's certainly issues, but what are you going to do? Not train? So of course there's issues. Um, it will not be as ideal as spaced out. Your gains will probably be a hair less. Your recovery curve will be slightly worse, but it's better than not training. But what you're going to find is by the Sunday workout, you're going to be pretty fatigued. The Sunday workout may be lacking in terms of quality stimulus. It's probably the biggest problem. So you may want to make it your least important day. That might be what I would adjust. So in that situation, I might look at it and say, what is your best and strongest area that doesn't need the most improvement? And that might want to be what you do on the Sundays in terms of lifts, muscle groups, right? Simply because, well, it's going to probably have the highest risk of lower performance, right? Because I got some wellness girls, and at a certain point, we have to lay off heavy compounds, squats, deadlift rows, good mornings, because it will blow out the erectors and hamstrings and overshadow the glutes. We need glute isolation. Um, Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm gonna defer back to what some good coaches I know say. Then your girls are in the wrong division. Your girls don't have the genetics for that division. If training balanced creates the wrong look, they should consider changing divisions if their goal is to be the best possible. Because usually the division that you're most genetically and structurally built towards, if you build everything maximally, you're going to place the best there. So in that case, and I've known coaches who are like that. They would argue that your genetics and your structure should dictate your division rather than picking the division and trying to pound a square peg into a round hole. Just food for thought. But then again, I don't do physique stuff. You know, I mean, you might have different ideas on that. And I get it with your clients, they might be dead set on that. And so even if you tried to take that approach, they might not agree. Hey Brain, yeah, you just joined in. We're already off that topic, man. That was the opening topic for the first 5-10 minutes, bro. So if you want to check that out, the discussion I was having, it's all good, man. No, it's all good. And the point I did make was, yeah, that the cost is still where black market wins, like by an enormous market. We all know that. But what happens if, in order to help our country, if our government actually shuts down the black market of drugs, your gear's going to get caught in the crossfires. If they completely shut down and really take seriously the entire flow of crack and meth and heroin and cocaine and everything, your gear's going to get caught in the sidelines. But our entire economy would dramatically improve. We would all be making more money. Our society would vastly improve, and we would probably have extra spending money for that. So it's just food for thought. Then you have to factor in that case, supply and demand. It would create more demand for the T clinics to expand because lifters would be wanting more stuff. So you have to look at the totality from a business and an economy perspective in that scenario, because that's why the topic came up. People have brought that up. They're like, so the things you're talking about, the current administration enacted these policies in the U.S. The gear would get caught in the crossfire big time, and it would, right? And it would. We know that. But your solution is then I would just do the legal stuff. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And you can't get Primo. Absolutely. Right. Primo is out there, but it is not easy to get. We're back to faked Primo. But it's not coming through China and Hong Kong anymore. It's coming out of India. And stateside, good luck with that. Europe, they're able to get it from India, and it's tested out okay. But yeah. Yep. Yeah, Peppermint. I think that's going to be the way I need to do the channel from here on. I'll go ahead and start doing some informative stuff again, get the flow of that up and going again, and just do one live stream a day, because I feel like we've oversaturated with them. No one's chiming in, no one's watching, and without views and super chats, they're not even worth doing. My efforts are better put into Facebook. What is fake Primo actually? Who knows? That usually test prop, things like that. I can get Primo. A lot of people I know just help out a stock and are pricing it up high. A lot of people are not carrying it at all. I mean, trained. I'm not saying it's not out there, but it's not as easy to get. And what you don't necessarily want to do is advertise that you know where to get stuff like that, because then people are going to be harassing you, blowing it up. Hell, you might even have to deal with a Fed trying to zoom in on you to find your source. Like, it's just kind of one of those things where you just leave it alone out in public. Don't be telling people, yeah, I know where to get it, because then everyone's going to want your sources and stuff too. People with good and bad intentions at a certain point. Yeah, I mean, there's still some out there, but it is certainly more difficult to acquire. Marco says, what's your thoughts on some people saying PEDs don't help much, like they downplay it a lot, saying stuff like 5 to 10%? I mean, objectively false. What are we talking about? Small doses? Are we talking about performance, muscle growth? I mean, muscle growth, we know it's way, 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 way more than that. And then performance scales with muscle growth. Sure, we could argue maybe for powerlifting purposes inside of the same weight class. Maybe that's accurate. Your total in a powerlifting meet, staying inside a similar weight class, I feel like that's reasonable. But the capacity to go up weight classes and the capacity for muscle growth. So you telling me some of these pro bodybuilders would only have 15 pounds less muscle, 10 pounds less muscle if they had stayed natural their whole life? That's what they're claiming with that. Yes, people in the fitness industry. So when you see a guy who's 240 pounds lean and ripped, who doesn't train to failure and just does pump work on a machine, when he would have a 25 fat-free mass index at 185 or 180, but instead he's 240 and doesn't even train hard, that's 10%. You know, that would be my response to those people. And you expect us to believe this? That's only 10%. Dude's 50 pounds over that sort of size limit, lean, and doesn't train hard. I don't know, man. I don't think that's only 10%, bros. They want to sell the idea, but a lot of them don't even train that hard. Right? A lot of them don't even train that hard to make those claims. Coach, your opinion on how to mitigate insulin resistance side effects when going 6+ IU or GH? I think metformin becomes useful there. Even then, here's your other thing: quit spacing the dose out. Quit giving yourself so much GH uptime that insulin resistance window is extended all day. Pick a time to pin it and do your whole dose, and stop spacing it out and making your side effects worse. Decide, do you want to deal with it when you're sleeping, or do you want to deal with it in the morning? And Broderick Chavez would agree with that same statement. I've seen him make that same point. There's part of your solution. And then if you're having issues with it still, this is where things like metformin come in handy. By the way, guys, that's where we're at with the PED world. We're having to discuss how do you deal with the insulin side effects when the growth hormone gets too high as part of your stack. Can fasted daily cardio? No. You're going to be insulin resistant during the uptime of the growth hormone. That is an undeniable biological fact. It's been noted in the lab. It returns to normal later in the day. So quit doing it multiple times a day to yourself. There's your solution. Since you know it's a drug causing it for several hours every time you use the drug, maybe don't use the drug as often. It's not like the IGF-1 boosting effects are different. The elevated IGF-1 levels from growth hormone last like 24 hours or longer per shot. So do you need to keep the levels stable all the time with the growth hormone and deal with all those side effects? Your IGF-1 boost is going to be the same. Like if you're using 12 units and you take it all at once versus 4 units 3 times a day spaced out, the net IGF-1 boost over the 24-hour period is still going to be the same. Even one daily bolus dose high enough, of course. But you're going to make it worse by spacing it out, Chad, because now you're going to be insulin resistant all day long. You know, when you could just be insulin resistant for 4 to 8 hours once, maybe like when you go to sleep. Just throwing it out there. You know, so again, people need to think through what they're doing with it and why. But everyone uses so much growth that they don't want to admit that, hey, dude, going over 6 units a day is a lot of growth hormone. That's a pretty hefty amount, you know, from a pharmacology perspective. You're going to have some side effects. I agree. I happen to agree with that. And I tell that to my clients, because I do have clients who are pretty jacked who do use, a variety of stuff. I tend to tell them that exactly. Just do it before bed. Your life will be a lot easier. I get it. Some people are going to want to do fasted cardio on it in the morning, in which case maybe do all of it then too. But if you're just seeking overall the net total benefits, do it before bed. You're going to mitigate those daytime side effects. You're going to get great sleep. It's going to help your recovery. You know, it might be the wisest option. Let's go over to Marco's question. Do you see the news that they let a trans man compete in the world's strongest woman contest, but the organizers didn't know it, and they took the title anyway? It was embarrassing. Wow. No, I need to look into that. That's ridiculous. Now, absolutely a problem. Like that is absolutely shameful. They should definitely pull that placing and give it to the next person down. Absolutely ludicrous. Yeah. Absolutely ludicrous. Oh man. What you gonna do? I'm gonna shut down the Facebook. That's long enough for now, I think. Facebook's doing really good. I don't need a whole lot of extra stuff in there. But I'm gonna keep the YouTube running here. We're gonna run this a while. And hopefully get some good traffic out of it. Get into the afternoon. I may have a call I have to do this evening. Oh man, you just said it and it's popped up in my feed. I need to screenshot some of that. All right, that's going to be a worthwhile discussion. I need to chime in on that on Facebook. Screenshot from my own stuff and then modify it from there. Again, this is the problem with this topic. This woke insanity. Absolutely destroying women's sports. Absolutely destroying women's sports. This is a problem. Oh man, we've had no comments in here. Everything died out after that. Thinking this might not have been the hottest topic. We'll have to pick them very carefully in the afternoons. Into just one live stream today. Is anyone even in here? Did the chat die? Because there's been no comments. I want to double check and reset something. There we go. It's crazy how the woke left just cherry picks what they like and push it into their agenda. It can be regarding anything. Yeah, it can just be regarding anything. And this is problematic. But they killed themselves with that in the U.S. This is a problem for them. Who in their right mind thought that this wouldn't affect their elections in America? Most Americans do not like the trans thing. By and large, as a society, the overwhelming majority of voters in middle America opposes all this trans stuff the way that it's been pushed. So then for them to push that and to then have their leaders and stuff act like it's a real topic, has absolutely destroyed them. This is going to cost them more elections. I will honestly say at this point, I believe from a voting bloc, without Trump derangement syndrome and without abortion rights, the left would be toast. They wouldn't be able to put anybody in power anywhere. The Dems would be a dead party. Right. Right. I moved to the USA from Serbia, but what part of the USA are you in? Eastern Europe 2 years ago. It's such a culture shock compared to what I grew up with. I come from a very conservative environment. Yeah, Serbia. So that whole region. I've known several people from there. One of my bros is Croatian. So that same obviously I know Serbs and Croatians are not the same. I'm fully aware of the situation. Just pointing out that part of the world. I don't want to piss you off here, Not trying to do that, but that region of the world. Right. So yeah, but I've known several Serbians and Croatians both. Live in Milwaukee. Interesting. Yeah, it might be regional too. It would still be quite conservative, and not as big of a culture shock if you were living where I lived. It'd be less so. It would definitely be less so. Right. Oh man. I would get really confused though when those topics, like someone put there, and I always have to try to remember who's who. Like they're like, well, as soon as trans men start winning this or that, then it'll be equal. I just saw that post, and I had to step back and try to remember what a trans man or a trans woman is. Like I get confused by the entire topic of what the term actually means. It's like I actually can't remember, and I'm not being facetious. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trolling. I'm not being rude. I literally can't remember which one is supposed to be which. So when someone says a trans man, I don't remember, does that mean they were born a man or a woman? Like I can't remember which one that's supposed to be. So you can't just throw that out there and expect me to remember, you know. Like I always get them mixed up as to which is supposed to be which. Like you got to re-explain it to me. Were they born with an innie or an outie? But the thing is, you say something like that, people think that you're trying to make a joke or something, and I'm really not. No, it's just really freaking confusing trying to keep up with how everyone defines these things. I can't keep up with it. It's just too much. All these minor, it's going to be gone in 10 years. No one's going to get, another generation is going to pass and this whole stupid trans thing is going to disappear and nobody's going to care. So it's not going to be useful information. You know, it is a fad that is going to go away eventually. You know, so it's too much to keep up with the way definitions change. Whatever they want to define each word, I just can't keep up with it. Just explain it to me in plain English. Right. I'm gonna get canceled for that, by the way. All right. I just sealed my own death warrant. I'll get canceled. How dare I not try to remember which phrase means what in their whole world? I just can't. Like you're making it too confusing. Does bro support Kosovo? I don't know. I don't know anything about Kosovo. And I think this is stuff we have to think about as a society. You know, this in a lot of ways, all this nonsense, it's weakening us as a society. You know, we need to really think about, you know, China at this point. Like it's fascinating to me that in the US, you know, we have all this stuff making us softer. Then look at the Chinese have taken the other route. Like China has started an entire program to make sure that their ruling class is more masculine and manly. You know, and so while we're having these discussions, you know, and our situation with masculinity falling and being under attack, China is basically creating a bunch of supermen, right? And their stuff has been, you can see the details. It's been public with some of it. You know, they've got their whole Han ruling class. They've got the boys out here doing tug of war and fighting in the snow, and you know, they're trying to build a whole generation of tough, powerful, masculine, strong men. And your kids are going to have to go against them one day. Like China is, at the rate they're going with us getting soft the way that we are, in China doing what they're doing, they're going to end up taking over the world. It's almost predictable when you observe certain things they're doing. They're going to become the superpower. So either we need to fix some stuff that we're doing socially, culturally, economically, or those of us who have a good business sense might want to learn to speak Mandarin. I'm just saying, you may want to learn to speak the language um, of the new rulers. Just saying. Do narrow stance squats work the lower quad more than wider stance squats? Hey, Benjamin. I'm going to go through this again, but I know for a fact that the person named Benjamin Dunstan has asked me a similar question, and I've given you an extremely long, detailed, nuanced answer to this question. And I remember for a fact that you were the person who asked me, and I gave this answer. So are we simply making new content and conversation, or did you forget everything I told you last time? So the topic is not, sorry, I just find it interesting. Okay. Cliff notes. The quad development end has to do with joint angle specificity. So how many degrees of knee bend do you get? Now, can your stance affect that? Yes. However, does the stance itself, is it the primary variable? No. So when it comes to the individual person, for you, for Benjamin Dunstan, and let's say your sister, Benjamina Dunstan, right? So you got Benjamin and Benjamina. Maybe Benjamina has a slightly different structure than you do. So I put you side by side next to your sister Benjamina, okay? And maybe her narrow stance doesn't give her a deeper angle of knee bend, that she's able to hit the same knee bend, right? With both stances, in which case there's going to be no significant difference in the quad hypertrophy for Benjamina. But for Benjamin, for you, if there's a difference in knee bend angle and you're able to get a deeper knee bend with the narrow stance, relative to your joint angle in your knee, then you may have the potential for a little more lower quad. But it is going to be dependent upon your structure and if it allows you to get the deeper angle. It's the angle of knee bend that matters. That is the variable that's going to affect that. The stance width is going to affect the angle indirectly. So the deeper you go with terms of the knees, the more potential for quad hypertrophy, particularly those lower heads like the VMO and everything, right? Is it going to be guaranteed to be more potential? No, but it's going to have the possibility of more potential, right? Night Raven says, stalling on the press at the end of novice linear periodization, suggesting to keep the press going up slowly but surely. You may not be able to keep it. You're just going to have to progress slower. You're not going to be able to do the standard novice linear progression anymore. Old Yeller. It's given the different names, but I checked your thing and saw you were the guy you used to call Old Yeller in here. Old Yeller. That's you. I was doing medium stance, which is actually kind of narrow for me, really. I was doing medium stance last week, but I took them out this week to let my shoulders kind of recover. I may mess with some Zerchers, though. I might try to Zercher squat while I let them. I want to see if I can get my shoulder inflammation to completely heal in such a way that I get range of motion and not do any overhead work and do nothing with even a barbell on my back for a bit. And then keep focusing on my bench and deadlift. But I may need to do Zerchers. I don't know what stance I'm going to do with Zerchers if I do. I'm going to have to experiment since I don't normally Zercher squat. But that's a good time to work them in, because also that additional pull down on the arms may be beneficial with opening up my shoulders more and that spacing and helping with the inflammation. So I might try to kill two birds with one stone. What about adductors? Do they get work less on narrow stand squats? We don't know. Maybe in theory, but um, all squats are going to work them pretty effectively, right? All squats are going to work the adductors. Every study we look at, adductors get amazing hypertrophy from all squats. So at least you have that benefit. At least you know they're going to grow with any squat stance. We can argue, but there's no data that the wider stance may give them more hypertrophy, right? But as far as hard data on it, I don't know that there is any. I think we could make a case for it. But you're never going to get monstrous adductors like a lot of people are worried about. That's a product of drugs, not training at a certain threshold. Because plenty of 600-pound squatters still didn't have them in the golden era of bodybuilding and back. All right. Look at Franco Colombo. Guy was a monster on the back squat, and his adductors were perfectly fine in terms of aesthetics. He didn't use a bunch of insulin and growth hormone. But as far as the other question on stalling on the press on novice linear progression, well, that's it. I mean, when novice linear progression stops, then it stops. And you're going to have to change to something else instead of NLP, because you can't just keep hammering the wall and the resets and the failure over and over and over. It's just going to beat you up. Do you think one carries over to athleticism better than the other? Man, I've heard really good coaches who are absolutely certain that one carries over better than the other on both sides. How do you like that, Benjamin? I've heard really good coaches, really good high-level coaches who are absolutely certain that one versus the other does so on both sides of the argument. I can make a good case for either one. If I'm going to go with just my best guess, educated opinion, I'm going to lean in the direction of that Olympic style full squat is probably going to be the best overall athleticism. And there are coaches who will argue against me till they're blue in the face on that one, by the way. There are coaches who, me even uttering that, would claim that I'm too stupid to have an opinion and that I'm too stupid to tie my own shoes without someone else helping me do it. Okay. And I know some really great high-level coaches who will agree there with me, actually. And that's one of those hills that people are willing to die on. Now, what I will say, if you want athleticism carryover, you should just get really strong at a squat. You know, these points of nuance become irrelevant if you're not strong. Like, you can't squat at least double your body weight. This is a completely irrelevant topic. So hopefully that makes sense in this context too, right? Because getting stronger at the squat up to that threshold, even if it's the wrong one, will still have better carryover than if you got worked on the right one. So just get stronger at some type of squat. You know, so again, if we have to look at these questions from the perspective of, are we looking for a nuanced, detailed answer that's technically correct? Or are we looking for something that we can apply? Are we looking for pragmatic? And the pragmatic is, well, none of that matters unless you're actually strong on the squat. and you're still better off getting really, really strong, it may be the squat that's the wrong type, than not getting really, really strong. High bar, low bar, Zercher, front squat, safety bar squat, they're all going to have good athletic carryover if you get really strong at it. So we are arguing tit for tat, though, with some of that. You know? And like I said, until you're squatting like double your body weight, ballpark, I wouldn't even worry about it. I wouldn't worry about the difference as to which one. Just get stronger. So hopefully that is a beneficial answer to you. So, you know, we can have multiple answers. We can have what's the technically correct answer versus what's going to actually help me. You know, do we have a practical takeaway that we can apply that is of value? Or are we simply looking for general knowledge in a discussion? You know, and we always have to remember these topics of nuance don't matter if we can't apply them to a real human being. Right? If we can't use these conversations to reach our goals and to improve ourselves or our clients or our athletes, then they're not particularly useful, are they? You know, it's like the litmus test I always give of, you know, hey, your theory is nice. Let's test it under a 500-pound back squat. There's your litmus test for your hypothesis. Hey, that's great. You conducted something and got some measurements in a lab. Let's test it under a really heavy squat. What happens in the real world with real athletes? Litmus test. So go look that term up. Go to Google and look up the term litmus test. It's a scientific term. So the basic term is, again, you just have the litmus paper. So it's, I'm going to read this out, but then you'll see there's two definitions. It's a test for acidity or alkalinity using litmus, you know, like litmus paper, right? You dip the litmus paper in the solution. We all did this, right, in high school chemistry. And then you look at the changes in that. Now, it's also metaphorically, a litmus test is a single question or challenge that reveals someone's true stance or success of a project or idea. Or, so it's also used in the dictionary, a decisively indicative test. Decisively indicative. But it's referring back to the scientific test on litmus paper where we test to see how acidic or alkaline something is by dipping the litmus paper in it. So in this case, that is the original meaning, but it is also a metaphor. But it's a standardized metaphor, you know, used in discussions like this. How you doing, Alpha Destiny Rack Pool? But I'm going to get some water. But we back. We back, guys. Yeah, I think we're back at that point where I need to do only one live a day. They've gotten oversaturated because this is just not enough views. Not for the amount of time I could be, again, spending this post and other stuff. Right? Posting other stuff, boosting the Facebook. Because I've had individual Facebook posts that have made $50 this month off of one post. I could be cranking out more social media posts, you know. So yeah, but I have spent a lot of time in these. You guys have gotten a lot of lives, but I think we're using too many slots towards it. You know, I think a little more informative balance. One good long live in the afternoon. It'll get people interested again. You know, they'll chime in more. Right? And since I can do them on Facebook also, and if I do too many on Facebook, it shuts them down. So that's how we need to win. Benjamin, sorry, one last question. Do the glutes have to be potentially specific to gluteus maximus get worked more with a narrow stance squat due to the deeper knee bend? No. Hip angle is going to determine that. The deeper the hip, the more glute. All right. The deeper your hip angle, the more glute. So just like the knee is what gives you the most quad, most of the glute is going to be relative to how much your hip bends. In other words, look at your thigh bone, your femur, relative to your spine. The closer it gets to the spine, right, your lower back. So again, this will be your visible. Obviously, it's towards your pelvis, but you can't see that as easily. So knee bend, hip bend. Right? Makes sense? So Benjamin, here's where a light bulb should be clicking. Okay, it's where a light bulb should be clicking. The further the joint of range of motion is on something, the more likely the primary moving muscles get worked more. Right? That point, hopefully a light bulb should click. In other words, the longer the range of motion of a joint, the more potential for muscle fiber activation in the muscles involved with that joint. So what you should be asking when you look at these different points and questions is, how far is the joint moving? Probably going to be indicative of that. Right. Well, think of hip bend too, not just because you're using bend and angle separately. No, they mean the same thing here, right? The more movement of the joint, the greater the potentiation in terms of the potential for the muscles to activate. Now, keep in mind that's only potential. Because is your glute fully activated with a submaximal weight or something not close to failure? No. So you still have to think in terms of quality of sets, proximity to failure, motor unit activation. You have to, those are all factors also. But in terms of total potential, well, more joint range of motion, more angles of range of motion of a joint, the more potential for the muscle activation. But it's not automatic. In other words, my biceps didn't fully activate just because I did this, right? There's no load. So let's make this really simple. Did I get 100% recruitment of the bicep here? No. I could do hundreds of these. We're nowhere near anywhere near failure. We're nowhere near any of the fast twitch fighters. So you have to factor that in, of course, too, of relative intensity. But you also need to consider that this is a point of nuance. What happens if you just go to failure? Let's say you do one of these exercises and you take a weight to where you fail on rep 8 to 10 and you take it to muscle failure. Well, a lot of these conversations go out the window, don't they? Because did it matter if you did the not most optimal variation? Which one's still causing more activation? In other words, if you do 7 reps with your 10 rep max of the wrong one, but it still works the muscles, versus if you did the other one and did your 10 rep max for 10, well, which one's going to have the most growth potential and all the muscles involved? The other, right? The one to where you trained the hardest. So let's factor that in also. Really, 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 really hard, intense work sets are still probably going to cause more muscle growth in the target muscles than the slightly more optimal version not done as hard. What would be the growth difference? We don't know, Trill. Do you want me to just make something up? An arbitrary make-believe number so that we can have one. I'll just make something up randomly. About 7.163%. And that could be right. It might be. But it could also be 17% or it could be 2%. I don't know. But what we generally know is closer proximity to failure generally causes more muscle growth stimulus. It's just that the failed rep doesn't really significantly contribute much, if at all. The rep right before it did, though. That one's really money. So it is fair to say that every rep closer to failure causes a slightly more robust muscle growth than the rep before it did, even on a rep per rep basis. Benjamin says, I find the theoretical components of training, especially the squat, really interesting, but got to be careful not to fall into paralysis by analysis, though. I agree. We have to be careful of that. You have to be very careful of that. And I think what people have to remember in these conversations too, all this nuance aside, with muscle activation, right? All this aside when it comes to joint angles and potential for muscle fiber recruitment, it can be interesting, but you know what also works well? Training really, really fucking hard also works. That also works really well. So much so that I will say it will probably work better than focusing on the other and dialing in the other perfectly. If you're only giving 80% of the effort of the other, it's still going to cause less growth. Training really, really hard and then recovering really hard afterwards gives you an enormous margin for error. Like your margin of error is pretty big on that. You're still going to stimulate really good muscle growth, even if you get a bunch of stuff wrong. Just the thing to remember is that when you train really, really hard, recovery becomes more important. minimizing junk volume starts to become more important because we just don't recover as easy, right? Or if we're not recovering session to session, we're losing growth. That's what George Lehman said. Those who will succeed will respond regardless. Absolutely. Christina, no, I'm not going to prescribe an RPE. I don't use RPE for singles. I think it's a trash dumpster system. I will never prescribe RPE for singles. Because when I hear 8, I think that you just basically wasted your time. You're practicing your form. I don't know. I don't get the RPE system. I find it very confusing. But you just use a percentage. How close were you to your max? I did 500. I felt like I had 10 more pounds. I think that's a good approach. How important is proper programming during a cut? There's no correct answer to that. I could argue that it's critical to avoid overtraining. It's critical to retaining muscle growth. It's critical to any recomposition. Probably pretty important. But then again, if I would say only in the context of if you're trying to get that last little bit of perfection. Because if I say it's not important, what you would consider not proper programming or bad programming may not be identical to mine. Doesn't mean you can just do randomness and just goof off and be okay. So, I feel like proper programming is probably a good idea no matter what you're doing. But without any sort of proper programming, particularly on the fatigue management side, well, this is problematic in a cut. Overtraining during a cut is pretty easy. So if you're not programming in an intelligent manner, it's very easy to get injuries, overuse, overtrain, and then stagnate and regress in a calorie deficit. So I would argue pretty much, and I'm not going to tell you where you can buy tea as a 22-year-old. Go to your doctor, go to the testosterone clinic and get a prescription is the only legal answer I can give you. I'm going to advise, Christina, that you follow the law and you go to a testosterone clinic and have a doctor prescribe it, would be my advice. In a public forum, I'm going to advise you to not break the law. Do dumbbells have the potential to cause imbalances more than barbells? Not necessarily. How are we defining an imbalance, though? So now we're going to get into this technical. You're going to have to give me this question would depend upon the individual movement pattern, by the way. The question is too vague. Are you talking about a dumbbell curl versus a barbell curl? Or are you talking about a dumbbell squat versus a barbell squat? See the problem with the question? Are you talking about, a bilateral or an isolateral leg exercise? Are you talking about a big compound with a dumbbell? Are you talking about an isolation? Right? A dumbbell bench press versus a barbell bench press. I'm going to argue they're pretty equal in terms of the ability to cause an imbalance if your form is bad. Right? So if you use a lot of compensatory movement and side shifting and loading, the dumbbell is going to have a higher potential for imbalances if when you get close to failure, you have large amounts of compensation. But without that, it may help correct some imbalances if otherwise, depending upon what caused them. But here's the thing you have to keep in mind. Are we talking strength imbalances or are you talking about aesthetic imbalances? And this is a relevant question because they're not the same thing. Right? Okay, because they may not square up. In other words, a strength balance may cause an asymmetry in terms of aesthetics, but you'll be stronger and have less injuries. That's a bit much for people to bite off. That's why genetics matter in bodybuilding. Okay. What's a very important aesthetic bodybuilding trait genetically? Symmetry. See where I'm about to go with this. Hopefully you see where I'm about to go with this. Are human skeletons symmetrical? In other words, are both of for humans, our species, if you go to just take a cross section of the population, are our arms and legs all the same length? Like right now, is your arm and your leg the same length if they were to measure it under a microscope? Are your shoulder and hip joints at the exact same angle on each side? No, we're asymmetric. People who are more symmetrical in their structure, closer to symmetrical, that's a positive genetic trait for bodybuilding. Because most people are not. There could be up to two centimeters or an inch difference between each of your arm and legs, and it's not even unusual. So if your shoulder and your hip angles are slightly different angles on your skeleton and one of your arms is longer than the other, your perfectly loaded symmetrical lift may cause a slight hypertrophy imbalance. You may have a slightly bigger pec and a slightly bigger delt, front delt on reverse sides of the body from each other. Your right tricep might be bigger than your left with perfect balanced form, but your left pec might be a hair bigger than your right using the same form, perfect form. So now, for strength purposes, that slight asymmetry gives you perfectly balanced force production side to side on these big movements. So if you go correct it with corrective exercises to make it visibly identical for bodybuilding purposes, you may have a force asymmetry. So do you see why worrying about this stuff is a really not a good idea unless you're trying to win a bodybuilding show? We fall into paralysis by analysis that literally might cause you to simply have a higher injury rate doing stuff in the pursuit of perfect balance. So the answer to that's really going to depend, though. I mean, so realistically, though, if you want the most balance, try to minimize your form shifting on that stuff to the best that you can. But if you have pre-existing things, structural things, it may be unavoidable on some movements. What are you going to do about it? Not a big deal. It's probably not worth spending a lot of effort thinking about. You know. But as far as having the idea that one versus the other, no, just it's going to be the side loading and shifting under the weight. Now, with certain dumbbell exercises, it may be higher because you may compensate a lot more on isolateral work, right? You know. Again, kind of nerded out there. So, but again, we always have to look at it of, what is our practical application of this? And is there a practical application of this? So that's one of those cases where, again, you talk about paralysis by analysis. You have the potential to fall into paralysis by analysis very, very quickly. Whereas in my practical benefit to a lot of this, I would tell people, don't worry about it. Just do your best to train even. Don't even worry about this. It's not a benefit to most people. And I'm not dismissive. It's because I've done this analysis and realized that based upon everything that I just said, for most people, this is a very quick paralysis by analysis that is not going to help you. And it's not because we don't understand it or we haven't thought it through. Is that the practical applications are that it can quickly turn into a larger negative than a positive. You know? I don't know. That's why I said it's something's hitting with the algo, Christina. It's been the last couple of days. I've realized kind of what's going on. I do too many live streams, and people are quite frankly a little bored. So I need to scale back the number to make it more encouraging for individual lives, and that's okay. I know how to adjust everything. But they were doing really good for a bit in terms of particularly super chats, money, memberships. They were actually really good this last month. So I just adjust. And that's okay. That's time that I could spend doing more Facebook stuff, which is more lucrative. No, it's definitely not fine. That's absolutely not. So I'm gonna cut back to just one live stream a day. And I think that's gonna be the sweet spot now. That's gonna be the sweet spot. What is this boy thing? Well, until you apologize for calling me boy, I'm not going to answer your question. You have to take that back, son. Hey, Alan, because of the creativity end. So I'm actually not as creative when I'm spending 3 hours in the coffee chat. I could be coming up with more ideas to get higher quality posts too. So you're only seeing the Facebook profile, not the page. And the page is the real money maker. The profile makes chump change, right? But I am hitting those up. But it's the creativity of it. I could get more work done. So I'm at the point now we're getting low views, and I'm spending like 4 or 5 hours a day in here. And the views are gotten really low the last couple of days. So it tells me I'm overfeeding it. What's going on, Connor? So I think we're probably only going to do an afternoon live, and then I'll go ahead and fill that morning slot with an informative video. Even though there's not much else to say, they'll probably get better work, and then it'll give me room for more shorts and reels, because those add up also. Keep in mind those double dip. Connor, appreciate the super chat, brother. Thank you. But I'm kind of thinking that that's what I need to do. Especially now that the Facebook algorithm is picking up. No, I can't do the shorts from the live stream. No, I have to make the videos. I've got to render stuff. No, they absolutely can't be done. No, it's not going to give me what I'm looking for. I have shorts that go viral every now and then. So getting them into the feed a little more often again. Oh, Connor, dude, I've been triggering big time. And it's flowing really good. My Facebook is now more profitable definitely than YouTube again at this point. So as of this week, my Facebook has definitely become the hot platform again, and I need to ride that wave, which means I can't spend 5 hours a day in live streams when I could be coming up with more creative content and individual posts. What's up, Coach? Veins looking good, getting lean, coming along. Yeah, because got to do business, babes. So I'm thinking the sweet spot here, and actually you're a mod, I don't mind telling you. I think the sweet spot here is going to be to just do the afternoon live, pick a harder hitting topic. People get one big shot every day. They can go back and watch it behind. And this is the ones that really do them well. I had that occasional one-off high super chat, coffee chats, but they're so few and far between that I'm more likely to get a viral post, creative post on Facebook than I am a super chat. It's there for $50 in a coffee chat. It's just statistically 50 times more likely, right? I am way more likely to make a post that makes $50 than I am to get $50 in super chats in a single coffee chat. Right. Because even some of my training pictures, like I put up a picture yesterday from my training or from 2 days ago, it made $25. So do you see, compare that then with the super chats, and the super chats are nice. Hey, I appreciate them. But do you see the difference? I'm way more likely to have stuff that hits. That pull-up post, you know what I mean? I think a lot of the posts are triggered. Well, they do sometimes. But Alan, we can get that once a day. You know what I mean, brother? When you go low carb, do you get any keto flu, or do you transition? I transition right into it. Do you get? No, I don't get 100% of it. They take a cut. I get about 85%. The bullet post didn't come from here, but it came from an afternoon. Alan, it didn't come from the coffee chat crew. It came from this time slot. See what I mean, homie? — 11th, like noted. Oh gosh, I don't know. No, because you're in the UK. Like my Americans can do Cash App. I get people who donate Cash App fans every now and then and stuff where they buy stuff off the wish list. But no, otherwise it's just PayPal, dude. It's just PayPal, which is a very, 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 very tiny cut. So it's not much. The UK and Aussie browse and coffee chat, not always, man. They're not as. No worries, man. Connor, I'll hit you up on Messenger. Yeah, that does make more sense. Do the Brits really call oatmeal porridge? Yes, they do. They call it porridge. You know, and Americans, that's funny. Yeah. And then the chips thing creates a little confusion for Americans. Be like, those are French fries, guys. Why are you calling them chips? I don't see Doritos. They're not made out of corn, you know. So the Brits call our chips crisps, and we call their chips French fries. Have you ever used a Mars bar? No, I've seen them. I've never used one. So you were talking about the training bar, not have I fried a Mars bar in a deep fry? Yeah, all I know is in the U.S., smoking a fag is way different than here. Yeah, very, very, very different, Connor. Um, and I mean, it could be taken a few different ways here because, like, you might be thinking on step back and rethink that completely different in terms of slang. Like, you might be thinking sucking on is smoking, whereas in maybe over here in Houston, I smoked that fool. Kapow! Right? Totally different connotation. Oh yeah, they definitely know he's British. Well, keep in mind, I have an ex-wife who is British, and so she was over here visiting once, and we were all going to the Renaissance Festival together, right? So a bunch of my friends, we were going to Ren Fair, like we got everything ready, and one of my friends who's a girl was over at the car. She goes, "Hey, could you hand me my fanny pack?" And, a fanny pack is like, it's a thing you wear, right? And the look on her face, she turned bright red and she goes, "Pardon? You're what?" She goes, "My fanny pack." And she just like, her face. It was classic. I'm very aware of what it is in the UK. So, you know, it's the linguistic differences. Yeah, you think it was a moose knuckle, right? She thought it was the moose knuckle. And so it was one of those cultural breaches. A British woman visiting Texas. You know, oh man. But the difference, and it's quite comical, the differences in the culture of people not understanding. So, and I kept having to explain, like my Texas friends, even when they met her, they're like, "Oh, they didn't understand. They're like, "Oh, we're meeting a proper British lady," and they wanted to ask her about the Queen, and has she ever been to any balls or seen real princesses, and cat like they're, and I know it sounds silly, but they're like, "Well, you're a proper British lady," and she's laughing, going, "No, I'm a country bumpkin. No, I'm not. What?" So it's like, because them being from Texas, they're like, she's a sophisticated, cultured British lady, and to a lot of Texans who don't know, they're thinking castles and queens. You got the queen. Like, do you know any princes or princesses? Do you like? Have you been to any like big balls hosted by a lord? Is in their mind, that's what they think of as British. To many Texans, that is, if you say the UK or a Brit, that is to them what British means. And to the Brits, you're like this. You got to be kidding. But understand, most Texans have never been to the United Kingdom, and they don't know any Brits. Right. Do you still see British lifting culture? Some of that, yeah, the same thing. I mean, there's definitely the British lifting culture. I did see a lot of the powerlifting in the boxing gym. So for me, that is kind of what I view British lifting culture as like. Like I think of strength gyms, the warehouse type gyms. I think of boxing gyms. For me, that's kind of how I picture British lifting culture, right? Um, now granted, you have your little goofy chains and stuff too, but so that's kind of how I picture it. Um, you know, where Texas lifting culture can be fairly hardcore too, though. But it's going to be a lot of it geared towards more like American football is a lot of the culture here. Um, and then of course the powerlifting and strength gyms, and there's still a very hardcore scene. And Texas produces serious strength athletes. Like on average, Texas as a state can compete with the UK in terms of powerlifting. They would be at equal comparison in strength sports. The state of Texas versus the United Kingdom would be a fair matchup if you were to just take all their top 100 best lifters and square them off against each other in competitions. Right. Doing reverse band squats in the UK with 7 plates was sick. Right? Oh man, I had knee wraps on too. That was in that old bag push video. It was hilarious too. Have you ever thought about doing? No, because it's too much protein relative to calories. Like I think it's unnecessary. And the other thing is, how low a calories are we going? Like think about that for a minute. I'm just not used to that low of calories. That just seems really low. So let's take that over an example. Let's say you mean 350 grams of protein, right? That's 2,800 calories at 50%. Man, I don't know how long I could stand 2,800 calories. Maybe. I don't know. I didn't really dip under 3,000 when I did that last 16-pound cut. Plus, I can overeat protein pretty easy too. I think it for a lot of people it's unnecessary. I don't know. I don't track all my stuff really though either right now. I'll probably the scale will start coming down just doing the low carb with the morning fast. Yeah, I'm at 3,000 calories and losing 1.5 pounds a week, right? So it's like it's trying to force feed that much protein as there's just no need, I'm eating a lot of meat and protein shakes to try to do that when I could just be enjoying more food. In that case, I could just be enjoying more healthy fats than avocados, nuts, eggs. Right? Yeah, I mean, and Texas has pretty serious lifting culture here too. Um, you know, a lot of it though is centered around back when I was in high school and doing football. There's a lot of has-beens. There is unfortunately because Texas high school football is such a big deal. There's a lot of has-beens, dudes who haven't been in a gym for 20 years talking about what they used to lift. There's unfortunately a bit of a cultural problem here too. Because all these dudes played high school football because it's insanely popular. Yeah. Yeah, while they're drinking the 6-pack, I used to lift. Yeah, while they're drinking a beer, the beer gut. Like, really, when's the last time you've been under a barbell? I'm gonna sound like here's your standard. I'm gonna make fun of my own culture here. I'm gonna make fun of my own culture while taking a big sip of the beer with his belly. Yeah, I used to lift. I had pretty good bench back in high school till I separated my shoulder. I've heard that line like 30 times, and I'm not even sure what they mean by separated their shoulder. Separated my shoulder. Really? That happens all the time, benching heavy. That what happens. Yeah. I used to bench 300 pounds in high school till I damaged my rotator cuff while they take another sip of that drink of that beer. Yep. Yeah, I mean, you have to see how it goes with some of that. Like I said, I don't get into a lot of the extended sets, but I think in limited use, they still have their place. Like I've done a couple of rest pause here this last week, weighted chins and things. Go to failure, then try to crank that one more rep out. Very common injuries in team sports, which most do in high school, right? The problem is if you watch the high school weight room, unfortunately, that is the downside with the Texas lifting culture in the high school weight rooms. What is a bench press in the high school weight room? It's 20 guys screaming at you to go heavier. When your last max you just did, you bounced the bar off your chest and your butt came 8 inches off the bench and took you 6 seconds to lock it out. And everyone's then screaming to put another 25 pounds on the bar for your next one in 3 minutes, right? All you, bro, while your butt's off the bench, dude's helping you lift it while everybody's screaming at you, unfortunately. I'm interested in following along with you at a lower carb approach for a while, not eliminating carbs entirely. Fast in the morning, 1 gram of protein per pound. Yeah, I'm definitely doing less carbs than that. And I like the way I perform on the high carbs, though, but I do know that I look leaner when I take them down. It's just the reality of it. And I don't like that fact. It's funny because I'm one of the people who thrives in a lower carb environment. Like I'm genetically biased towards it. I eat 330 grams of carbs 20 days. I mean, that's not uncommon for me to eat 500 or 600 grams of carbs a day, if not more, when I'm doing really high carb. But right now it's going to be whatever's in my other stuff. It'll be like 40 grams, whatever's in the vegetable sources of fat, But the thing is, unlike some silly other stuff, I'm not adding a bunch of stupid saturated fat. We're not adding butter. We're not getting really fatty cuts of meat. We're not eating bacon. And like, this is where the people run into problems with this diet. Oh, let's have a bunch of bacon. It's like, this is a problem. Let's add butter to everything. No, let's not. Will I eat some moderate fat beef? Sure. The only meat I'm going to do is going to be beef and chicken. I'm doing eggs, right? John O. Hey, Jason, how can I combine wrestling, powerlifting, strongman training? My schedule for wrestling practice is Monday evening, Saturday morning, need a good split. Whew. John, I have coaching slots open, by the way, if you need help with this or do you want to hit me up for a consult. Consults are $100 an hour. I'll be happy to help you write something. Otherwise, if you're just looking for a brief free answer in here, some sort of conjugate system, right? I think conjugate would be a good choice for you. A basic conjugate template, like a 4-day conjugate template. I have some free ones on the channel. If you do a channel search, you should be able to find some. I have a whole playlist on beginners conjugate already on the channel. It's been there for years. That would be a good resource to start with. If you're not able to afford services and you just need something that would work towards your situation, right? Where you're trying to combine those different elements for wrestling, but still looking at those elements. I think conjugate splits would be a good system for you, right? But if you need further help, obviously beyond that, you can take advantage of my professional help. Matt says, me too, coach. I find that I'm with higher fat, plus my job is based a lot around physical appearance. So it's nice to be leaner. So the waistline difference for me. Yeah. It matters, dudes. I feel like I'm already seeing a difference. Are you guys seeing a difference already? Is it just me? Someone said yesterday, one day into low carbs, you're like, you actually do look a hair leaner. It's like, wow. We'll know in about a week. Yeah. I start dropping water. It's just right. My stomach feels better too. I don't feel as bloated in my stomach usually. I mean, I only eat one cheat meal a week. I haven't done any. I lost 14 pounds of visceral fat way down. You can tell overbulking messed your health up big time. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And health is wealth, man. Health is wealth. You know, and and that's something I believe in with all of this too. You know, I mean, setting aside the physical. I mean, we're all several of us are spiritual people in here. Part of your spiritual journey, man. Your body is a temple, right? Like your body is a temple, dude. You know, you have to treat it accordingly. Um, you got to treat it accordingly. And if we're running around being fat and we're harming our body, we're not treating our body like a temple. You know. Also remember garbage in, garbage out. You know. So. And that is a factor in those things. You know, in terms of our spirituality. I think that what we put into our body and the way that we treat our body is a big deal there. I think it matters. Yeah. I feel like losing fat has de-aged me by 4 years minimum. I look way younger. Right? Yeah, that's interesting. That it may be already coming down. We'll see it over the next week. I think how much it's going to change. Yeah, that ability to breathe, man. That's definitely a problem when you overbulk. It's absolutely a problem. That's a real problem. Yeah. Makes sense how big guys get CPAPs oftentimes. Right. Yep. No, absolutely makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. Makes perfect sense. So, we're almost to the 2 hour mark. I might wind it down at 2 hours here. And so, yeah, I think we're going to just do the one afternoon live stream, and that's enough. It might be an hour some days. Some days it'll be a couple like this. Yeah, I feel like I'm oversaturating it when I could be doing other projects with it. And I get burned out talking too much in these streams. So I'm gonna be honest, guys, man, I do get tired. That's a lot of talking. But yeah. But how many hours of it do people have, man? We got the bell turned on, and I think too, if I'm not hammering the content, those alerts are going to hit, and I think they'll pick back up more. But I do need harder hitting topics in them titles. You know. Yeah. Well, the afternoon ones are more likely to get really good views. Those the morning ones only get decent views because of the length of them sometimes. Right? It's only because I'm running them 3+ hours some mornings while I'm working on other stuff. Like that's why. But it's no longer an efficient use of time. Outreach is worth more even then because more clients, right? And then if I'm double streaming the one stream, I'm more likely to hit that bigger client base too and not oversaturate it. Awesome. Appreciate the super chat there, BMW. So I think I'm about to wind this down for the day. Well, but they'll chime in. These will rotate at different times in the afternoon. Some days I'll have to do them later than others. So they'll end up balancing out, They'll balance out in the wash. I think it's about time to wind it down. So I'm gonna give you guys a bicep shot before we go. Oh, Mount Bicephalus. I'm doing good, guys. I'm gonna roll on out of here. And like I said, Felix, I'm gonna start doing just one stream a day, just because of the total workload involved in my other social media. But I'm gonna do one big stream in the afternoons, and I'm gonna do them like this. So this sort of time slots will probably be good, and I'm gonna double stream on both platforms. I'm doing too many of them, but it's all good, guys. I'm gonna get off here. I love you guys. No, Felix, you didn't scare me off, brother. You're good. And I'll catch you guys tomorrow. And tomorrow's gonna be a training day. We're out.